In this video, I'm going to give you a tour of my new vegetable garden. Those of you who are new to the channel will know that I've recently started to transform part of my current garden into a vegetable growing space. And in this video, I'm going to show you the progress I've made so far, some of the things that I've been doing over the last few weeks, and also I'll be showing you some of the things I'll be doing to create more vegetable space by using pots. Now, this video should be of interest to vegetable growers of all types of experience, from beginners to experienced, and with all types of vegetable growing areas, from large growing areas, gardens or allotments, to smaller spaces like mine, or even if you want to just grow in pots or containers, there'll be something in this video for you. So let's go on a tour of my garden. Now, as you're going to see, my garden is very much still a work in progress, and really it's only been the last 2 or 3 weeks that I've been transforming this area, getting ready for vegetable growing, so there's still an awful lot of work to do. And in this area over here, you can see I've already got 4 raised beds in position, and behind it a brand new compost bin. Now, I've cut the hedge as far back as I can without compromising it, because I still want to keep it as a hedge because there's a little pathway behind it. But of course I have to balance that with the need for as much light from my vegetables as possible, so I've cut it back as far as I think is safe without compromising the hedge itself. The far left hand raised bed over here, you can see, is sited right within the hedge. Then I've got raised beds next to it and one behind, and then one just in front of the new compost bin. Now, installing all of these raised beds, I've used the no dig method. So underneath the wood chip, you can see here between the raised beds is cardboard, and that cardboard is also at the bottom of each of the raised beds. Then there's my homemade compost, and this one here I've completed with a bit of multi-purpose compost, and as you can see I've already sown my onions in there. And next to the onions, what I'm going to do over the next couple of days is directly plant my beetroot seeds straight into the compost. As you can see, I've netted over the area as well, because in the garden we do have a lot of birds, so I just want to make sure that the vegetables are protected. I do need to finish these beds off here and put some multi-purpose compost on top, and particularly this one at the back here next to the plastic compost bin. That's going to be quite shady, so I'll be selecting specific vegetables to grow that thrive in the shade, and I imagine that's going to be where I'm going to grow things like lettuces, spring onions, etc. Over here is my brand new compost bin, which I'm really pleased with. I've made that out of pallets, and I think it's a really important message for anybody, even with a smaller space like I have now, is to ensure that you do have some way of making your own compost. Because as you're going to see in a minute, I'm also going to grow a lot of vegetables in pots, so that's going to demand quite a lot of compost. And if I was to buy my own compost for the amount I'd need, it'd be really expensive. So if you do want to know how to make a really quick and simple compost bin out of timber pallets, then I'll put a link to the video in the comments below. I was lucky enough to make a great deal of my own homemade compost at my allotment and bring it back here, but I've used it all up. And as you can see in this bed here, it's only really a third full of what I'd want. So I am going to need to buy some more compost for this and the other area, which I'm going to show you over here, which I've done nothing to just yet. And I am also going to grow vegetables here. What I have done, I've cut the hedge back slightly at the back, but these 2 conifers here and here, I'm going to take them out completely, even down to the roots. And then this area will be cleared over here, and this is where I'll be growing vegetables, even this little patch here up to where this tree is, which is also going to come out, which is completely dead. The growth around it is the ivy that's wound around it, so the tree itself is gone. And now this other area here for growing vegetables. Now at this point in time, I suspect what I'm going to do with this area is use this to grow vegetables traditionally, i.e. I won't be using no dig or raised beds. I'll be digging out the weeds and planting the vegetables directly into the ground and see how they go compared to the other area, which is over here where I have my raised beds. So as you can see, I've still got quite a bit of work to do over here, but in all honesty, as bad as it looks in terms of the weeds, that won't take me an awful lot of time to clear. Now, although I can still grow an awful lot of vegetables in the areas that I've just shown you, it's not enough for what I need. So what I'm now making use of is pots. Here you can see I've got 16 30-litre tubs, and these have got my potatoes planted, which I planted a few weeks ago. There's 2 varieties of potatoes in here. One is called Picasso, which is the main crop potato, and the remainder are Charlottes, which is a second early variety of potatoes. As you can see, I've also put a grass mulch on top of those. They're literally just simply grass cuttings, and that was done straight after I planted them, and as you can see now, they've started to die down a bit. But the grass mulch is important because it will help to retain moisture in the pots, which will have a tendency to dry out a lot quicker than if I put them in the ground. Now clearly, with the ground I've got, I wouldn't have much space for growing potatoes because they do take up a fair bit of space, so pots are a fantastic alternative way of growing potatoes. I'm now going to take you to the front of my garden and show you something else that I'm growing in pots. So this is the front part of my garden, and here you can see parts where I've got tomatoes growing. The 5 pots that you can see directly on the camera now, they're a variety called Momande, and they are bush variety of tomatoes. And the other variety, which are over here, are a variety called red cherry. And as you can probably guess by that name, they're a much smaller type of tomato. Now, because of where we are in the year, in the middle of April, the temperature at the moment is really unpredictable, and we have had some unsettled weather over the last week or two. So these tomatoes have been moved in and out the house as needed, and in fact, the last 3 days they've been in the house permanently. And that's because we've had heavy winds and we've had some fairly low temperatures. And that is one of the major benefits of growing things like tomatoes in pots, is that you can lift them up and move them. If I were to leave them outside in that wind and cold temperatures that we've had, they clearly wouldn't survive. These tomatoes will need to be repotted one more time into larger pots, and yesterday my new pots arrived. These are 15-litre pots which cost me £26 for 10, which represents £2.60 each, which I think represents really good value. They're a good, strong, sturdy plastic with plenty of drainage holes in them, and they're going to last me for many, many years. So I think they're really good value. So over the next week or two I plan to plant the tomatoes in those deeper pots. Now, one thing I've always tried to do on the channel, which a lot of people have complimented me for, is be completely honest with everything that I show you. And just over here, you'll see a tomato that has died. This is one of my red cherries. I always grow a few extra tomatoes. For what I only need around about 4 plants of each variety. I did start off with 6 of each, and now I've got 5 of each left because one of them, Monday, died as well. I'm not sure why this died. I don't think it was because of the cold weather, because it had the same treatment as the other plants. But it might have been, when I transplanted it, I might have been a bit too heavy-handed and I might have damaged the stem. That's all I can think of. But obviously you can see that that tomato plant has completely gone. Maybe that'll give you a bit of confidence if you're a new grower and maybe some of your plants are not thriving or not growing. Just to let you know, it happens to all vegetable growers, and there are times when plants will die and will not be successful. Now I've also got further vegetables growing indoors. This is my back room. And if we start off by the windowsill, I've got 5 cucumbers that are growing really nicely there. These are a variety called Market More. And if you are going to grow vegetables indoors, they do need to be where there's plenty of light. I'd imagine that these are going to need at least another 2 to 3 weeks indoors. Over here, we have my first tray of peppers, and these are a mixture of jalapeno and DKN, and they're doing really well. Peppers do need decent temperatures, firstly to germinate. So I germinated these initially in my propagator and then brought them indoors and put them exactly where they are now on this windowsill, and in a position where, as you can see, they get plenty of light, which is so important for seedlings to thrive. If I come over to here, I have another tray of peppers. Now these were planted a few weeks later than the jalapenos and the DKN. These are sweet peppers, a variety called California Wonder. There are 3 jalapenos here because there was some spare, so I put them in pots as well. There is going to be more peppers than I'm going to need. I'm probably going to have about 4 of each variety, and then I'll gift the others to family, friends, and anybody else who wants them. And finally, indoors over here, I have a variety of different veg that I started off a number of weeks ago. So on the right hand side, the first little cell is Rocket, and the 2 behind it are varieties of lettuce. The middle one is Little Gem, and the far one is Lola Rossa. And I will start to prick these out very, very soon, and then get them ready to go outside when the temperature increases. The spring onions have just started to germinate. They're normally a little bit slower. You can just see them just under the leaf there. All of those 3 cell trays were planted with white Lisbon. And in the next tray, which I'm just going to turn around just so that I can see the labels, these were planted a few weeks ago as well. They're doing quite well as well. Celery has germinated, which I'm really pleased about, because that's notoriously slow to germinate, but that's done well here. So I'll leave them for another week or 2, see how they're getting on. Next I have basil, which has just started to germinate. And over here I have thyme. So 2 decent herbs there. In this first tray here I have kale. In the middle tray I have cauliflower, variety called All Year Round. And this few seeds here are a cabbage called January King. Now, because I've got less growing space this year, I purposefully grow my vegetables in these small cell trays rather than sow lots of seeds that will germinate and end up with so many plants that I won't have space for them. So over the years, I've tried to sow just the seeds I need at a particular time. And these small cell trays are perfect for the amount that I will actually need. If you notice thyme, the basil, and the celery, they're slightly angled to one side as they're growing. And that's because they're attracting themselves to the light, which seedlings do. So what I'm going to do now is turn the tray around so the seedlings are leaning away from the window. Now, because the seedlings will try and angle themselves back towards the light, they should straighten themselves up over the next couple of days. But I'm not too worried about that. They'll be pricked out very, very soon and put into individual cell trays, and they'll be completely fine after that point. So as you can see, even though I haven't got a greenhouse or a polytunnel, there are still ways in which you can grow vegetables inside as long as you give them the right conditions. And something else I want to show you is these. I purchased these about 3 or 4 weeks ago when there was an offer. I think they were around about £19.99 each, reduced from around about £25. So we've got a couple of them. Now, because I no longer have a greenhouse or a polytunnel, I needed something to be able to bring my plants and seedlings on in a nice sunny and warm position. So over the next week or so I'll be putting these up because the weather now is starting to improve a little bit, but I will need to keep an eye on things like the wind because these are quite flimsy. I've seen lots of horror stories where these are blown over with people's seedlings in them, which is completely devastating. I don't plan to secure them down too much because I'll be keeping an eye on the weather, and if it's predicted to be windy, I'll just bring the seedlings inside. But these are an excellent alternative to not having a greenhouse or a polytunnel. Now, the final thing I want to show you is my potting shed, and I really like this. It's one of my favourite parts of the garden. I have the benefit of having this at the end of my garden. And as you can imagine, this is where I do all of my planting of my seeds, my potting on, and all the other bits and pieces needed for me to grow my vegetables. And this potting shed over the next few months will be used heavily as I start to plant more seeds. At the moment, because of the cooler temperatures, as you'll see, I've got 1 or 2 seedlings that are started indoors, such as lettuce and spring onions, etc. But what I did want to show you though is these, because I bought these last week from the garden centre. I love herbs, and I'm sure a lot of people watching the video also like using herbs. There's nothing like going to your garden, getting fresh herbs and using them directly in cooking. So I went to the garden centre last weekend and picked up 3 of my favourite herbs for £10, so 3 of them for a total of £10. And I bought them for a specific reason because firstly, I love herbs anyway, but the main reason I bought them is because I'm going to take cuttings and grow further plants, particularly with sage, which is an absolutely amazing herb. And this is probably my favourite herb. One I really love is rosemary. I'll be doing videos over the coming months showing you how to do cuttings and take cuttings for yourself of these so you can start to propagate and make your own plants and save yourself an awful lot of money. I've also got thyme as well. I've got some thyme seeds that I've planted as an experiment, so I'm going to be looking at ways of propagating thyme as well. The other 2 plants here, I have a fuchsia, and I've recently published a video on my channel. If you do like flowers, there's a video on my channel showing you how to take cuttings from this plant here, which is still really, really abundant and still healthy. I've managed to get 12 cuttings which are inside this propagator, which is not switched on, by the way. And if every one of those is successful, that means from that one single plant, I've got 12 new plants plus the original. So definitely check that video out for yourselves if you want to know how to take cuttings from fuchsias, and I'll put a link to that video in the video description below. This here is something I also love in the garden. It's such a fragrant plant and beautiful when it starts to flower. It's lavender, and I'll be taking cuttings from that as well. So as you can see, I am making good progress, but I've still got an awful lot of work to do in order to get my vegetable beds ready for planting. And April's a really busy time of year anyway with sowing and planting, so there's a lot of work for me to do over the next couple of months. But I do hope you found the video interesting and it's give you 1 or 2 ideas. It doesn't matter whether you've got a large garden or an allotment where you're growing lots of vegetables, or a small garden, or even growing in pots or containers. Everybody can grow vegetables, and how much you grow depends on what you want and how much space you've got. So I do hope you found this video interesting, and I'll post future progress updates later in the year. If you did like this video, don't forget to give it a thumbs up, and if you do want to subscribe to the channel for future videos on how to sow and grow fruit and veg and flowers and 1 or 2 recipe ideas, don't forget to press the subscribe button. And I'll see you all on the next video.